do it. No, you're.
Oh,
cool.
No, we're all on stage.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Oh, we're live. Welcome, everyone. So I would say let's do a quick round of intros. Joe, let's start with you. What's going on with the sunglasses? Is it really that sunny in Paris right now? And why are you not taking this video call from in front of the Eiffel Tower?
Yeah. So what's up? I'm Joe. Reis. I'm in Paris right now. I'm auditioning for. It's good to see everybody. I'm in Paris too, but yeah, not in front of the Eiffel Tower. I thought the Wi-Fi might be a bit spotty there. It'd be kind of a miserable event. So good to see everybody.
Good to see you, Alex. Let's go to you next.
I'm Alex Dean. It's good to be here. One of the two co-founders of SoFlat, also the CEO, and I'm dialing in from home in Wimbledon.
Lauren.
Yeah, and Lauren Balik. I own a consulting firm, Upgrade Analytics. Do all kinds of data stuff there. Unscrew a lot of data stuff. I'm in New York City.
The best of all the cities in the world. It is the best for data.
That's where you are. That's where you are too.
Oh yeah, hands down. All right, let's just jump in, Lauren. So let's say you. By the way, to everyone listening, we have not talked about an agenda for most of this entire.
It's unscripted.
It's unscripted. Yeah. I have some questions as ideas, but we're going to just go from there. Feel free, everyone else, to ask questions as well. Lauren, tomorrow you drop in as the head of data at a company, either as a consultant or as a full-time hire. You are given $100,000 for the year. What do you do?
$100,000 for the. Does that include my salary?
No. So you get your time. No. You get $100,000 in cash.
Right. So what I'm doing, and how big is the company?
100 people, e-commerce brand. Yes.
Got it. So what am I doing first there? I'm figuring out, as head of data, what exactly are the main problems pressing the business? And that could be, like these companies, they have a canary in the coal mine. Like people, their intuition about where problems might be or where they're not getting as much return as they should. Like usually people's intuitions are pretty good. So I would go ask, the CEO, chief product officer, like the head level, C-level people, like what the problems are. And I would be asking, where do you think, like, what are your biggest 3 to 5 problems? Is it, e-commerce company, like you said? So do we own the manufacturing or someone else manufacturing for us and we buy it off them? Are there supply chain problems? Like what's our turn look like? How fast are we moving product through?
Question for you on that, Lauren. How do you keep it focused on things that you could solve with data? So it's like, great, you go to the CEO and they're like, what keeps you up at night? And they're like, fundraising. And it's like, great, we're going to run out of cash in 12 months. How do you think about it through the lens of, or do you not? Do you think about it as, let's just focus on the business priorities first and then dig in from there?
Focus on like what you can actually solve. Like, right? And so like, if it's a supply chain problem, like what's wrong with the supply chain? Is it like 1/3 of products are not, getting into our warehouses in time? If so, like, how do we track that data? Is it a marketing problem? Is our CAC too high? Like to your point, like, are we burning too much CAC? Is it a marketing problem? Do we have a competitor who's just outbidding us everywhere? And then, to draw it back to data, like how do I come up with, the 3, 5, 7 or so, like reports, insights that, show me like, and my team, like how to manage the business day to day and where the gaps are. And like often that might not be like setting up a data warehouse or setting something up, but it could be, but it means usually like just figuring out what the source systems are and what, what's important.
What would the $100,000 go towards? Trips,
my bonus.
Travel.
Yeah. Pizza parties.
No, the 100. Yeah. Oh, well,
do you need it?
How much data work is needed.
One question is, do you need $100,000 to accomplish any of this stuff? Like it doesn't matter.
Not. It depends on, if I need to hire an analyst and the analyst, costs a certain amount of money, plus total compensation and whatever, like maybe if there's enough work that it requires 2 people and not just me, maybe I'm hiring another person. Maybe not.
Joe, I got a question for you now. Let's say you're doing what Lauren's talking about here. You're talking to executives. You're inside of a company, either as a consultant or working there, and they just don't understand data. Like they speak a different language. Maybe the CMO speaks marketing, the CRO speaks bookings, and you like. How do you, as someone who has written a book on engineering and talks and speaks all the time about this type of stuff, how do you think about educating executives about the impact of data and why should they even think about using, whether it's data technologies or data analysts, to solve these problems instead of just their existing workflows?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you gotta meet people where they are, frame problems in a way that they're going to understand. So anymore, I try not to talk about data actually, right? So you're going to have a component to this, obviously, and that's probably the underlying way you're going to drive value and results. But I find that the data discussion scares them, one of the two, typically, if they're not a data-minded person. And so I tend to just talk about whatever vocabulary they're and maybe not even trying to change the terms they're using, just understand, make a mental map of like what's common, right? Bookings, revenue, whatever, right? I know they're the same thing. I can map these accordingly, but anymore, I think it's about meeting people where they are. People get pissed off at data people, I think, because shout over them and obfuscate with a lot of fancy terms. At the end of the day, people just want to do their jobs, right? It's kind of like, every one of us, if we're working at this e-commerce company, say Alex is working in finance, Lauren's working in fulfillment, Ethan's working in marketing. It's like, I don't have time to, especially when we're in a cash crunch, I just need to get stuff done. So help me get that done. So that's how I approach it.
Follow up there is, okay, great. You got the executives bought in. You can speak the language of the business because you ran a business before. What do you recommend to data people that don't speak the business? Like let's say you are that data person. You're like, yes, like we're going to write the SQL query. We're going to use DBT. We're going to use a data visualization tool. It's going to be version controlled. Like, what would you recommend to those people about being able to speak the language of marketing or being able to speak
I used to be that person when I started out. Just an idiot, right? I came out of math school and everything was an equation to me, right? Kind of still is, but my ass, basically. So to put it pretty bluntly, it was one of those things where you had to and I think it still holds true. You gotta take the time and understand that your world is not other people's worlds, and you really just need to understand. And the first question you need to ask is, how does this company make money? Period. Right? How do we make money? Also, how do we lose money? So, and if you know those, a lot falls into place. But yeah, I mean, you're just gonna have to face facts to understand that people just don't speak your language, and you're basically a people. So it is what it
Love
is.
It. So Fish just joined. Fish,
caught the first question, loved it from the get, and I loved Lauren's answers. She would spend the whole entire $100K on Lauren herself, which I think is probably the biased answer of this crew, but I'm also interested in the go-around version.
Can you give us a quick intro? Can you talk about your 10-year tenure at Bacon Hot Sauce as the chief strategy?
I was able to edit myself in the application, and of course it was Bake Entrepreneur, which is so I actually founded a bacon flavored hot sauce company with my Mozart Data co-founder Dan about 15 years ago. Sold hundreds of thousands of bottles, and our sort of fake origin story of this company was that we were running a failed DTC hot sauce startup, and we really needed all the data, but we couldn't get it, so we had to start this data engineering company instead. So usually there's always especially the groups that you bring together, a little bit of a lighthearted story behind everybody in data. There's people that take it seriously. We all take data pretty seriously, and we're all very accomplished in this space. But everybody's got from Joe's sort of off the top costume to my personal professional background. We all have sort of a lighter side. And I think that's actually important to actually having an impact in an organization. You can't just be the person that comes in with this is the right way of doing things.
Totally. I know you've been leading data teams at like Yammer, Zenefits, Open Door, like big name companies. And back to the conversation we were having, it's like, Lauren was starting to answer, like, what do you do when you drop in as the head of data? Joe's like, great, here's how you start speaking the language of the business. You've done this before. Kind of what are the mistakes that people can make when doing that? Or like, do you have any lessons learned or best practices in terms of just like actually infiltrating the business people?
Yeah, it's always so disappointing when all like the panel sort of agrees on things. But, to me, it is a very iterative build that, I think when you're at a sophisticated organization, there's usually existing legacy things in place. And, you try to mirror that, or you imagine sort of mirroring that at the next place that you go. So we had a successful stack at Yammer. And then I say, okay, well, now I'm at a new company and I just want to bring everything that I had there, maybe like a little bit better and the more sort of modern versions of that to the next company. And that actually is in my mind, sort of the wrong approach. I think it's actually so much more. Yes, I like this idea of you've got to speak the language of the business. You got to earn the trust of the business. You got to sort of earn the action that you're going to take off of this data of the business first, and then you have a corresponding need. So typically, not to knock a great product like Portable, but typically it starts actually with the sort of left tail of connectors. You're like, I really want to answer something out of Salesforce, and not actually with ELT or ETL or any of these things. Usually it's like, I want to download a CSV, and in Excel, I want to count my number of customers in my Salesforce account. And then, I think it's sort of a gradual build on top of that, which typically, evolves out of the need of the business, what you need to optimize, where are the opportunities. And some of that is huge amounts of intuition. Like, we're all data people, but it's deeply driven by that intuition of like, where do I smell something that we're doing sort of suboptimally in the business?
Yep. Alex, over to you now. Let's say you've done all these things. Lauren spent $100,000 on whatever Lauren spent $100,000 on. And now you've decided, great, you can speak the language of the business. You're starting to figure out what to build, what to hold off on, et cetera. Like there's a bunch of options. You could hire a consultant, you could build stuff in-house using open source technology or just writing code from scratch, or you could buy vendor solutions. Kind of how do you think about the trade-offs between, like, when you're ready to execute, and it doesn't have to be just against the tech, against like a strategy. How do you think about build, buy / consult? I don't know if it's build, buy, partner, build, buy, consultant as your options.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ethan. So I think there's loads of like talk and kind of there's a lot of changing of thought at the moment about build versus buy, compose, build to buy. It's all got really complicated. I think that it's much better to start from like an actual kind of use case, an actual thing you want to solve, whether it's an insights use case or it's like an operational one, or you want to activate some data in a customer flow, whatever. And like in the games industry, like I'm sort of weirdly obsessed with the games industry. I wrote a couple of games when I was a kid. Like there's a lot of practices that are kind of abhorrent, but one of the things they do really well is they do this kind of vertical slice or kind of a spike through all the different layers of the game to get something playable. And kind of to Joe's point, like data doesn't exist as an island. Like it's part of like operational processes, as part of like the wider organization. So I'm a big fan of like figure out a cool use case, figure out something you can't do that would move the business forward, help it make more money, and then just do a little bit of each of the kind of parts of each of the work streams to just get the proof that this thing works and get everyone talking the same language. Because like we're all kind of guilty in data of sort of always moving to the next big shiny object, and like we're going to build this awesome dual zone CDP or whatever this thing is. But actually, like you've got to take the organization with you. And if you start with something small and you get everyone working together, then you can go and do cool stuff later.
Joe, back over to you. What are the business use case? Like when you either talk to people or drop into companies as a consultant or just work at companies as a data person, like if you think about like the patterns and the trends of like the top 3 ways to actually create value from data, like there's analytics, building dashboards, there's automation, automating workflows, there's building external products. But like, what are the things that you keep seeing repeated? It's like single customer view, maybe. Like, what are the things that you think of as, if you haven't looked at these 5, you might be missing something when it comes to creating business value?
Ooh, good question. And apologies in advance to the audience. Some people, if my Audio keeps cutting out. It's because I'm on hotel Wi-Fi, and I'm in France right now. Nothing's working, so that's that.
The French are not working either right now.
No, there's like trash piled up on the streets. Everyone's like complaining, "Oh, sorry how dirty it is." I'm like, "Yeah, you haven't New York or just kidding." So, but yeah, back on point. It's an interesting question. I think that it's kind of actually take kind of following what Alex was talking about. Really, I think it's a matter of like starting really simple, right? It's as much answering questions as it is getting people into the habits of using the data you're providing to make. And you never want to frame it as a data only thing. You want to say like, this is, these are some cool ways you could go make some money. This is, whatever in your business, hopefully is making money, right? But that's how I would approach it. And kind of following what we said too, like I actually gave a talk. I actually suggest people start with a spreadsheet. Just answer questions with that. It costs next to nothing. Everybody has it. I mean, Excel too. So I mean, that's super cool. But start small, because you want to get people, again, it's about building the habits of people using data in the organization. Not you providing more reports, more analysis, but I think you need to be that bridge that gets people into the habit of like utilizing in a regular fashion. And once you have that, you're going to hope that you have scaling issues with your spreadsheets. That would be awesome if that could happen. Then you can go buy all the fancy tools. But in terms of like how you approach it, I don't know if there's like a rubric that I have. I think really got to pay attention to what people want and just meet them where they are. Like I said, it's but do it in a low fidelity way. So that $100,000 you pitched to Lauren, I would say that buy pizza with it or something. Like all your tools, you basically have them already. You just got to use them. I mean, some of the most effective data teams I've seen are nothing more than Excel shop. But the thing is, they know how to utilize data, and they're absolute warriors at this stuff. The anti-patterns I tend to see we fail with stuff is taking a tool-centric first approach, just buying all the tools, thinking that's going to solve your problem. Now there's a team of and that's that.
Totally. One thing that you brought up that I thought was really interesting is it's like find a business problem, solve it with technology. To start, it could be an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe then you move to Google Sheets. I'm a Google Sheets person. And then from there, like, it's not that you need the next technology because you need the technology. It's because it breaks. So like Pete Fish, I'm curious, like what are the points that you've seen technology stacks break? And then what do you do? It's like, great. We know that Google Sheets or Excel has a limit of like 1 million rows of data. Like you cannot process more than that inside of your spreadsheet. So it's a question of like, now what do you do? Like when you think about points at which a tech stack can break, whether it's a spreadsheet or an early version of a data stack to something more scalable, to something even more scalable, what are the points where you think people should start looking and being like, I'm accomplishing business things, this is broken now, and start up-leveling their technology?
Sure. So, as a tools vendor, I don't want to like poo-poo all versions of let's not even quickly jump towards tools. I love to jump towards tools, especially early. But the honest answer, and I'll give it for a later example. Actually, somebody asked me this question yesterday, which is, when should I basically write and schedule a transform as opposed to maybe write a more complex SQL query or a CTE? And typically my answer is the same for ad hoc analysis, and it ends up sort of applying to all of these things. It's usually like this is not really a smart answer, but this is my best answer, which is usually it's the third time something is asked, one should ditch the existing tool. So it's like the first time, like, do it ad hoc, do the brutal process where it takes G Sheets like, a whole like 12 minutes to calculate some like conditional sum. And then the second time, do it again. And then the third time, essentially tool your way out of the problem, because, now there's, there's this sort of N-1, like when you're, doing sort of like a statistical test. And, I would say that, somehow the number 3 is kind of been my rubric. Once it gets asked 3 times, get it out of a repeated sort of very heavily manual process, because that's something that you might see again and probably will have ROI in a sort of go forward way in terms of your life hours and spend.
Love it. We're definitely in at least I take a pretty similar approach. Like my goal, back to Joe's point, is like create a culture where people use data to run the business. Like for us, we have it's effectively a big dashboard where it's like, here's our overview KPIs. Now we have event KPIs, how many people have registered, how many people are speaking, et cetera. Then we have customer success, customer support, finance, et cetera. And like, we look at them to start. And then it's like, okay, great. What else would we want to have there? Right now, none of those transformations are scheduled because they're not breaking. Like I can run them all in my visualization tool, and some of them get expensive. And then to your point, like they have to get expensive 3 times before we actually solve the problem. Like they get expensive. We refactor the query. It's like, okay, great. Maybe it only runs when we click a button. And it's like, okay, you do that again, and it's like starts to get more expensive. It's like, okay, now maybe we materialize it. Maybe we push it upstream into a different platform. But what do you, Alex, curious to get your take, like, what do you think are the biggest mistakes? I know Joe mentioned the idea of just like tool-centric approaches. Like, what do you think are the other biggest mistakes that data teams are making, or either data teams or data team leads are making in the market right now? And what should they say?
That's a gnarly one. I think it's been the last couple of years, and I think it's vendors as well, but it's also teams. Is I think too much focus on like the second order effects or the third order effects. So they're kind of like, if we do this, then the quality will be better, and then this thing will happen faster, and then there'll be more business value. And I think we're just not in that market anymore. I think we're just in a market where you just got to cut out the second order, third order. No one's got time to listen for the kind of the 5 whys of why this is important. Just like get embedded in the business teams, the teams that are helping make money or save money, and just cut out the middle stuff.
Lauren, question for you. Are data teams bloated today?
Yeah, no, that would have been my answer to the question that you just.
Is that a reasonable question, Joe?
Data teams are too bloated, and like this is all to the benefit of a number of vendors in this space. Like a lot of what's happened in the last couple of years is it's become cool to go on social media and talk about the new tool. And you're a data engineer or a data scientist or an analytics engineer. And you just heard about this new cool thing that got $100 million in funding or whatever. And everyone's kind of rushing on about it. And then you start building with it. And now you stick another tool in because it's kind of cheap, it's kind of free. You stick it in your stack. It does a little thing for you. And then another one happens. Then another one happens. And then your team that was 2 people, now you've got all these extra things you're gluing together. You're making more tables, tables in the warehouse. Your warehouse vendors love that. But you have to hire more people to get more work done and get stuff through. Like the throughput of what it takes to get data out of sources, mapped to an entity, like your business's idea of a customer, your business's idea of what a sale is or a return is, whatever it is, to get that throughput all the way through and stick it on a dashboard. Like there are too many products and too many people involved now at a lot of companies. And I don't want to go too macro here, but like when interest rates are low, companies have more money, especially VC-backed ones. They hire more people because it's kind of cheap to do that. The products don't have to be as strong because you hire more people, weaker products. And now the big shift we're seeing is, maybe you didn't need 10 people on your data team. Maybe you needed 4. And maybe you should be buying that $100,000 ETL tool that does more than the cheaper ones or the open source frameworks you're using. And so there's a lot of up and down movement now as companies are forced to scale back. And the biggest cost with all this, unless you're doing like really crazy machine learning, like spending tons on compute, the biggest cost is usually people. It's not the tools necessarily. So yeah, I think that most teams are too bloated, and we've been seeing a pushback on that with frankly just people getting laid off the last 6-8 months or so.
So Joe, I want to get your perspective on this. So like, I personally agree that over the last few years, the teams have become a little bit bigger than they probably should be. And to Lauren's point, like it is by far the most expensive line item for pretty much every data team. Like if it's not, you're probably building an ML model or like something crazy. But curious to get your take, like a lot of people hiring data teams don't have any data experience. It's like trying to build a technology product without any software engineering experience. And it's very easy to like be a founder of a company that has a business background and look around and be like, I need a CTO or I need a software engineering team, and have no idea what's true. Or like even hiring a plumber. Like I fix up houses. Like if you do not understand how plumbing works or how HVACs work, like someone can come in and be like, yeah, you need 12 new pipes and like just to get like to unclog the toilet. And it's like, how, if you're a CEO of a company and, or the COO or the CTO, and you don't understand data, like what should they, like, what's their responsibility in this, either 2 years ago when they were hiring the data team or today? How do they like, because you might need to downsize. And in that scenario, even that, how do you know what needs to be downsized if you're the CEO of a business or the COO and you have no data expertise? Like what recommendations do you have for those people, the people that don't have a data background, but have a data team that roll up into them?
Oh, give me the fun questions. Yeah, that's right, because it's yeah, because the last couple of years you've been led to believe that data is going to solve all your problems. Maybe it hasn't. I think it's. I mean, the most extreme case would be, fire your data team and see if change in your business, but you're probably not going to do that. So, or you might. I don't know. It depends. So yeah. It's ideally you would be hiring, all along to fulfill like, certain business functions and measuring the results of that. If you have, I think you kind of put yourself in a corner in a lot of ways, and getting out of that. I don't know if there's like a single answer. I think you just need to evaluate like, what's true now for you as a company, and or these domains or these, or just, what teams are pulling your weight. Right. That's how I look at it. And if a data team happens to be attached to that department, great. If not, like if it's just floating out in the answer, right? So, it's I'm more of the person. I mean, again, I had to run a business and we had to do weird stuff like and money, and it's like a really foreign concept, I know, but so I am pretty ruthless when it comes to costs. I mean, business is business at the end of the day. If I have to cut, I cut. There's human costs involved, but what it is, it sucks. And so you try not to get to that spot in the first place, hopefully, is what I'm saying. But if you happen to be there, you're going to have to look in the mirror and really hard questions as a leader, like how the hell did I get here in the first place? And that's not going to be an easy answer, because again, when money's cheap and flowing, I was a second ago, and it was like, back in the good old days, you could run a company, send everyone to conferences, go buy whatever, some swag. I mean, all that stuff's gone, right? I'm personally disappointed that there won't be a great swag soon, but swag
there's going to be a secondary market for swag. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Okay.
On this, Alex, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's a really you gave you a gnarly question, but I was thinking about it. So we've kind of we've hired our kind of data leadership in the last few months at Snowplow, and that's an area I'm fairly obviously pretty comfortable with, but obviously I am a generalist and I have hired leaders into roles that I'm not expert in. Obviously, I reckon so here's what I think. I think the market's changed a lot, to Lauren's point. I think one of the biggest failure modes is if someone comes in and they've just got like one playbook and they just know how to do one thing. So I would test any head of data or any CDO, or it's just been at a CDO conference. I'd test anyone to be like, okay, that was the playbook. I'm sure it was a good playbook for that time. Times have changed. What's the new playbook and why are we changing this? And like, how are we going to redeploy this data team? And like, what's our tooling strategy? What are our goals here? See how adaptable they are.
So Fish, how do you measure? So let's say you're the CEO, you are the CEO, and you have a data, and you hire a data team. Like you hire a head of data, chief data officer, a data analyst. Like, how do you measure? It's like money is going out and some value is being created. Like for me, when I think about events, like we put on happy hours in the city, the money going out is $0 for those. They're free. You can buy your own drinks if you come to New York. And like this, we spent 3 weeks of two people's times on this virtual conference. And to me, it's like we attribute back how many people from that sign up for our product, how many people from that will have email addresses and be able to say like, hey, of that X number of people are paying us on a recurring basis. Like it's business, to Joe's point. How do you do that when you're hiring a data team? Like you're hiring a team to measure other teams. Like how do you measure the success of that team who's measuring the success of the other teams and quantify it?
Sure. Put directly, it's a cost center. So, this is a big data audience. So, correlation versus causation causation is very, very, very hard to tease out. So even in any role, especially even directly money touching roles, typically people are like, well, if you hire a salesperson and they make X dollars of sales, that's like, net positive if they exceed maybe, a certain ratio to their salaries. It's not the case. Like very often there's other things going on in the background. And I think part of the story, and Lauren goes to interest rates. I'm an economist by trade, so I love thinking about kind of the interest rate effect. But in reality, it was, times were good sort of across the board. So, and as you were adding more people, more good things were happening, right? So, you sort of attributed, data and winning sort of together. Just the way that our brains work is that when we see this correlation of these two things are happening simultaneously, it's that A causes B. Though we know intellectually as well-trained data people, like actually, no, that's not exactly what it means. So then there becomes this question of, okay, you hire, data people. And the idea of hiring data people is they find some efficiency. It's not that they create reports. Reports are useless. It's insight, it's action, it's all of the things. So, you create this like efficiency, and now like, maybe it's, you measure this data conference, or you measure your happy hour, or you actually, redirect some advertising spend, or you shrink some other part of your company, and you make a model that highlights which customers of yours are most likely to churn, and then you tell the CSM team to go take an action on those teams. And you say, well, look, like, I created this model, and then as a result, you can't run the counterfactual. Joe sort of even jokingly said, all right, we'll fire the entire data team, and then we'll see what happens. And then we'll rehire them the next week, and then we'll see what happens. You can't even run on-off, let alone A/B experiments. You can't even run on-offs. So, we live in the real world, right? Like, I'm sure you could sort of implement something like that in theory. So it's very hard, and very often when you can't make that direct connection between $1 in and $2 out, you in good times you might double down into those bets, and in bad times you very quickly like retract from those bets. The typical thing that I hear in the investing world right now is the best time to invest, because everybody is so scared now. These are going to be the best vintages, and this is going to be the best time to invest in something. I'd say the same is actually true of your data and your data infrastructure, which is we are certainly over our ski tips in the world of free money and hype and all the amazing advances in data and the right tail of capabilities in the data world. So we were there. That to me has gone backwards. So when you think about measuring, we have a data team. At our company, when I think about measuring their output, I don't. I think that would be very, very difficult in reality. And I don't also like fire them one week and then hire them the next week, etc. So I would say that as a result, I think people are generally reluctant to invest in resources that you cannot directly tie to dollars. That includes, data teams, data infrastructure, but I think that this is the opportunity, and you'll find that the companies that are doing well with that today are actually probably going to be the ones that come out of this the best.
Totally. It is really interesting because like we heavily invest in operations at Portable. Like we streamline. It's how we can build and maintain 350 integrations with a very lean team. And it's one of those things where along the way, I can't point and be like, this decision here is going to save us X number of hours and get this benefit. But like in the long run, it's these decisions allowed us to not have to hire another person. And then again, not have to hire another person. So I think that's a really good point in the sense of like, it's tough to understand. It's tough to quantify. I really liked your comment about reports are useless. If you're an analyst, let's say you're inside of a bigger data team and people are asking for stuff. Let's go back to you, Fish. Like, and people are asking you for stuff. It's like, hey, I want this report. I want this dashboard. I want this insight. how should you think about at the micro level, not the macro level? If I'm the CEO, I need to justify a data team, but at the micro level of requests come in and I have stuff to do. Like, how should you think about that when it comes to prioritizing so that you don't build the useless report?
Sure. So I've been a data analyst and I've been the leader of a team of data analysts. So this question is very like near and dear to my heart. A lot of the time, if you do a great job, the precursor is you've done a great job and you've built the demand for these sort of almost like mind-numbing BI charts. You've built that demand. You've already done the pre-work and you've built a system that can actually deliver that and basically make data available across. Now people start coming to you with like asks, maybe simple asks. How many customers do I have in Germany? Why do you want to know that? It's like how many? It's like so. You start building. You start getting asks and questions, and many of those questions actually don't have an associated answer to it. And people will give you the advice of you should have maybe a ticketing system, or maybe a system where if somebody comes to you, you say, well, what are you going to use this for? Or like, what decision would be different if the answer were A versus B? I rarely find that works. Those are the right things to ask intellectually, but this is that trust exercise and this business sort of analytics buy-in that I think you really need. Sometimes you have to do this work just because. I mean, I'll go on a full brag. I'm getting married in June. And I'm very excited.
Congratulations.
All exciting stuff. And hopefully this recording doesn't make its way to my fiance, but part of
what are you about to say?
Sorry. I'll cut out all the things that I shouldn't say. What I will say is every relationship, whether that's you and a business stakeholder, involves some sort of mutual understanding, mutual respect, building trust, like sort of that virtuous cycle. The best data teams, one of the things that I think it was Joe or Alex brought up that I think is kind of that is really top of mind for me is I had a coworker at Yammer on my team, Ben Stansel, and Ben wrote a piece about our team at Yammer, which was an amazing team. And he said, look, like the tools that we use today are 100 times better than the janky stuff we used a decade ago or 15 years ago. And that's very true. But the teams are effectively collectively about as effective, and then or less. And the question is like, why? How have we gotten this much more powerful? And like and the output is the same and or less. And my answer to that is basically this is the person capability, and that's that sort of virtuous cycle that you deeply have to build. And yes, the tools can accelerate you in that respect. And one of the things that Portable does or Mozart or any of these tools is it cuts out some of the rote stuff, but the really hard stuff, the building of that relationship, the understanding of the the equation of the business or the way that companies make money or don't make money, that's still the same exact problem. So, part of it is doing these like sort of useless reports to actually better understand what these business users are trying to optimize and what they're trying to get at and what they believe. I mean, they're sort of front line, so now I've done a million eye rolls. Like I will say like, I'm in this talk. I'm like, oh, what happens when a business user comes to you and asks for like, I need to know how many, when I was at Yammer, how many users, from the Netherlands have sent more than 4 messages on a Tuesday, but not on a Wednesday. Like insta eye roll. Maybe I'll answer that question. Maybe I'll push back, but I think like it's just sort of think of it in the sort of picture of building that sort of virtuous cycle with your customers.
Totally. Everyone around this table runs a company in some capacity, or runs a company, and I think it's very similar to like when I think about being a successful, like I've been a data analyst before. I've been the head of BI at LiveRamp, and I think it's very similar to being a CEO in the sense of your job above everything else is prioritize. You need to find the most important thing to your business and like spend 80% of your time on that one thing. And because if you pick the wrong priorities and you spend 80% of your time on the low value stuff, you just won't get anywhere. It's like the ability to identify the things that will 10x your business. And I think one of the mistakes I see data teams making, especially more junior ones, is to your point, they'll create a ticketing system. They'll like field these requests where it's like the Tuesday versus the Wednesday. It's like, if 99% of the company's revenue is made on Wednesdays after a Tuesday where someone sent four messages, like maybe that's the highest priority thing for the company to figure out. It probably isn't though. And I think being able to wrap like all the way up the chain, being able to understand that you need to say no to 80% of the requests just because they don't make it into the top 20% is the most impactful thing a data team or a data analyst or a head of data or a head of BI can do, or a CEO can do. It's just identify the biggest priorities that can have the biggest
I think
impact.
Warren Buffett calls that the avoid at all costs list. So you're familiar with the story, like, yeah, fly me around a lot. Like, what do you want to do in life? And so he asked him to list out the top 25 goals that he had. Then he's like, okay, so sort them out, draw a line under number 5, and anything under number 5, you don't do that at all until you've ticked off the top 5. So, but that has to come from the I mean, and that's a hard thing to do, especially when things are kind of in flux. But like, that's why I mentioned True North earlier. It's like, what is that? That should be your guiding light. Like, where are you trying to go? What's your mission as a business? Like, that it should, especially times like this, it forces ultimate clarity.
Totally.
Ultimate clarity, then I don't know, might be interesting. So what's that, Alex?
I think I totally agree with what you guys said. I think like it's almost a bit like filibustering or something when these teams start asking all these questions to the data team, and the data team has to put in a work queue. And I think I'm still sort of working through this theory, but I'll share it, which is I think it sort of messes up the power dynamics a bit as well, because I think like, look, we're in a much tougher economic environment now. Everyone in a kind of when everything was just kind of very like obvious growth, everyone could high five each other and share the kind of the good news stories. But now we really don't want teams marking their own homework. Like, we really, really don't want that. Like, we have to have very clear separation of referee and player, or like poacher and gamekeeper. And I think if you've got a power dynamic where the data team's just swamped with like requests, low-level requests from individual line of business teams, when they should actually be getting a holistic view of how the whole business is performing and which parts of the business aren't pulling their weight, that's problematic. Hot take. Oh, maybe it's not that hot.
Totally. Hot take. So that's a great segue, Alex. Let's go around the room now, and I'm curious to hear everyone's hottest take for the next 12 months. And we are going to start with Lauren.
I mean, I've got 100. I could sit here all afternoon and rant about things.
Joe said only focus on the top 5 and then hold off on the until we get to the top 5.
Yeah, mine is so the hottest take here is that the whole NRR, net dollar-based net revenue retention, also known as NRR, NDR, you'll hear them used simultaneously. There's pushback against it. I've seen this already heavily. And what I mean by this is that, these compute centers, your Databricks, your Snowflake, your, Google cloud platform, whatever you're using, Spanner, BigQuery, whatever. So much in the last couple of years has, been this, like, when you invest in these companies or you invest in their partners, you're investing in this NRR system, which, like, if you look at Snowflake and if you look at some of the others, they have, 150, 160%, net dollar retention. And if people in, the audience don't know what that means, basically, how much do you make in year 2 off of a customer versus what you made in year 1? And so, if you made $100,000 off the customer in year 1, year 2, you make 150, that's your, retention year over year. And a lot of this is driven by, I would say, sloppiness or laziness, or just not caring all that much about how models are written, how SQL is done, how many BI tools you have that are pinging models, queries, whatever. And a lot of the data teams that I work with, which tend to be a little bit more like mid-sized, upper mid-sized, have pushed back on this and are getting away from it. And they're looking at their bills for the first time, and this whole system, what do you want to call it, the modern stack or whatever, is kind of based around this. from an investment side and a financing side. And now we're seeing the first pushback against it. And I think that in the same way that, we see all these over leveraged bankers right now, with debt, that's going to be what makes the equity ladder here fall apart, of how a lot of these companies are financed and how a lot of teams think about this. Because if you're an analytics engineer, data engineer, whatever, your job's more important than like the system that you work on. And if you need to start, consolidating things, dropping tables, just deleting business intelligence reports, that you should be doing it. And some teams are doing this. More is going to happen, as a lot of businesses are in their second year, their third year, their fourth year of this investment, of going 130%, 130%, 150%, et cetera. They're now in this high interest credit card, and they're scaling back.
I think another way, let me know if this is correct. I think another way of saying that is there's this baked in assumption into the economic model of a lot of data companies where more data equals more value. And I think that flies directly in the face of everything we talked about before, which is like pick the top 5 highest value things and ignore everything else. I think what a lot of data stacks and technologies and teams are built around is the idea of you can never deprecate a thing. It's like you build a transformation, you can never deprecate that. It's got to run every 6 hours. Like you built a dashboard or a report, you can never deprecate it. And I think in that world, then I don't think that model breaks, Lauren. I think NRR does go up for a lot of companies, but I think data teams need to be more willing to shut stuff down and need to be more willing to prioritize the top 5 and realize that the top 5 for next year is not necessarily the top 5 for this year. We only have 7 minutes. Joe, hottest take.
There's a couple things. I think it largely depends on the interest. Chickens out and starts cutting, then I think you're kind of maybe back to where we were in the past, but I don't know. That's impossible to say. We're in a really weird environment right now, but what I noticed from a practice standpoint is the pendulum is swinging back towards, I would say, kind of old school stuff, right? So governance, data management, that kind of stuff is becoming more popular again. So I'm writing about this right now in my new book, but it's sort of the pendulum and the spectrum between, strict and formal versus relaxed. We've lived in a world of relaxed standards, like lack of data modeling, data management and governance is a bit fluffy, but I think a lot of this is coming back. They're basically going to become a lot more, I hate to say European, but they tend to do things a bit differently over here than in the States. In the States, we move really luxury of moving fast and breaking things, except when you don't get that luxury. And I think we're, that luxury is being taken away. So you're going to see teams. I think what it's going to mean is data teams are actually going to work a lot better. Honestly, I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't. You learn to do more with less. You learn to focus. I mean, yeah, I think that it's going to be net positive for data teams at the end of the day. It's going to be painful to get there, but this has to happen. So.
Totally. I love the idea of just like for Portable, we not taking on much money. We were super lean, and it forces us to be like, we need to find an answer to this problem with the people we have around this table. And you cannot just raise your hand and be like, I need help. Give me more money. Give me more people. Right. And I think for the last few years, it was very easy to be like, we're in hyper growth. Like can I hire another person? Hey, can I hire another person? Hey, can I have another $100,000? And with that going away, it's good. As you said, it's gonna be painful to go through. But at the same time, I think not being able to raise your hand is a great forcing function for prioritization. You have to. You don't have another option. Alex, over to you.
Yeah, I totally. I was going to say something really similar to Joe, and I know it sounds a bit counterintuitive after saying like don't focus on the second order, third order effects, but I really think like master data management is going to come back in a big way, and we started working with a couple of folk at Snowbear who like everything inside the business needs to be a dimension. And I think it kind of helps explain a few points. It's like you have a stronger operating cadence. The data team isn't constantly trying to fix stuff and like deal with ambiguity. The whole business is kind of coded. So yeah, it's a bit old school, but I think MDM is back.
We'll wait until my hot take. It might be different than your hot take. Fish, over to you. What do you got?
I'll try to make my hot take the exact opposite of everybody else on the panel. So, I'll try to make my hot take the exact opposite of everybody else on the panel. So, first of all, sort of largely, like, sort of optimistic take from my perspective is actually like tools will come back into vogue. So, I really do feel like the pendulum has swung in the total opposite direction of incredible sort of shrinkage and austerity, like in terms of like being very, very smart about your spend. I generally find that things are like overcorrecting. Actually, my PhD dissertation was about people overcorrecting in video rental store late fees, which are, it's like, but I really feel like that sort of has been always in part of my life. They've overcorrected and we've really cut. Now, I actually think, so to totally disagree actually with Joe and Alex, actually the tools that I actually do think will come back into popularity are the most mission critical. Literally obviously you and I are big believers in the EL. So I would say that things that companies really need, the tools that they most need to do the most basic of the work, all the stuff that we've talked about over the last hour. Like, I actually think that investment will continue to be, strong and very solid. Obviously hopeful for myself and for Portable in that respect. But I actually I do think kind of the lessons and the medicine have really started to shift that way. And I think that you substitute out the really, really, really expensive high-end good, which is the data engineer or the person on the team.
Now that Fish took so Joe, Alex, any rebuttals to that? Why do you think do you think MDM and data quality are coming back from an implementation perspective? Like, are you seeing it go in? Like, are you seeing the biggest banks, the biggest customers, like, invest more in it, or are you seeing it more? Like, I'm seeing a lot more when it comes to conversations that, like, investors calling me about things. Like, I'm seeing it in the conversation.
No startup's going to go heavy into like MDM before they've got product market fit. Like, I think it's more that like that the inflection point from, like, let's talk startups, it's kind of more tractable. The inflection point from like product market fit to like go to market fit and the sudden scaling, like that might, that might be only like 12 months or 2 years or whatever. And like, if you don't have that kind of stuff in once you start scaling, like you end up with like just a data team just constantly like writing shit tons of SQL to try and deal with human middleware, like Lauren calls it. Sometimes you just end up trying to piece things back together.
I actually don't think so. Back to your point of like there's MDM and then there's all the other, like, I think even in this conversation we kind of maybe I just heard it wrong. We like kind of bundled MDM in with data quality, observability, that type of stuff. At least in my head, that I kind of associated things together. As I think more about it, I think upfront strategy around your entities within your business and how they relate to each other is gonna come back hard, because like if you like, and maybe that's what we were talking about here when it came to MDM, because similar related, but it's like actually being able to say like, hey, we care about our customers, we care about subscriptions, we care about employees. If you don't do that correctly, like it does, I don't even care about your observability quality. I just care about like you're gonna duplicate a bunch of stuff.
100%, Ethan. And you could do that in Excel. You could do that in Excel totally.
Awesome. I know we have 1 minute. So my hot take for the next year is I'm a lot more optimistic. So like we had a whole conversation today about teams are downsizing, like things are bloated. Like I do believe that. But what I'm really optimistic about is I would guess that there are about 10,000 companies right now that have a data stack, like a modern version of a data stack. Just like there were a ton of employees that worked at Google and some of them no longer work at Google. The thing I'm really like, and that sucks for a lot of people. The thing I'm really excited about is if you downsize 10,000 data teams and you have, let's say 10,000, 20,000 employees that have data experience that no longer work at those companies. Sure, some of them will find roles within those 10,000 companies. I'm really bullish on what that means for the other, I don't even know how many companies there are in the world, the other 100,000, all the other companies that haven't had a data team before, that haven't been able to create value from data. Have these people, I talked to a ton of people becoming data consultants, entering new businesses. So to me, like, yes, I believe downsizing will take place, but I also think we're going to see a pretty big reallocation of data resources to companies that have never had a data team before. So I know we're out of time. Thanks to all of you for joining today. I'll talk to you soon.
Au revoir.
Thanks.